Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Panic at Metrotown Mall. Hundreds forced out as heavily armed officers race in.
It was a matter of time.
Certainly this is helpful.
Masks expanded. Mandatory face coverings for all students, K to 12. Also, it's on the move. But how? The Great Pumpkin 2021.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. We begin tonight in Burnaby, where hundreds were forced out of Metrotown this afternoon. Heavily armed officers were seen racing inside, searching for a suspect. Our John Hernandez is live at the mall tonight. John, tell us what happened.
Yeah, so the calls came in about 3 hours ago. Reports of gunshots at Metrotown. That's according to Burnaby RCMP. And then reports of a pipe bomb at Metrotown Station. That's according to Transit Police. Now, obviously, this led to very frantic evacuations at both sites. I spoke with some of the people who fled. Have a listen.
So there was an announcement like everybody should exit. So there's some incident, some firing going on.
Well, I wanted to get out as fast as I could because I was with my daughter and I was pushing the stroller as fast as I could. I was just running.
And all of a sudden, the cop comes with his rifle out and he's running towards us. And then all of a sudden, people started coming out of the mall in crowds.
And John, this was all over social media this afternoon. People posting videos, people asking what's going on. So what's the latest you're hearing from police on the investigation?
Yeah, so Metrotown Station has been swept and cleared by Transit Police. The pipe bomb threat, obviously non-existent. The station is still closed, but trains are running through the station. Meanwhile, a bit of an active ongoing situation here at Metrotown. Now, it does look like some of the police cars have left, but the latest that we've heard from Burnaby RCMP is that they've swept through the neighborhood and are still in the mall. However, there is no evidence of an active threat and no reported injuries. Now, police are asking people to steer clear of this area for now, and some will remain on scene as the evening progresses. Anita.
John Hernandez reporting live tonight from Burnaby. Thanks, John. Well, starting Monday, all school-aged children in BC will have to start wearing masks in class. The province made the move today after several school districts had expanded their own mask mandates. But as Susanna De Silva reports, some experts and parents are calling for even tougher measures.
I am extending the PHO masking order.
After several districts decided to go it alone, the province has followed suit. But Dr. Henry insists public pressure didn't prompt the move.
So it was a matter of time once we had the data that we presented on Tuesday to look at what are the important measures that we need to do.
Data that shows an increase in cases among school-aged kids, and the BC Teachers Federation believes the province was left with no choice.
I think the pressure was mounting from both families and from trustees around the safety measures. And I think what that tells me is that there was a really deep dissatisfaction with the safety measures that were in place. And you know, I would say there still is, though certainly this is helpful.
For many parents, it's a welcome move.
It is hard for the kids to learn it at such a young age, but we support it. Yeah, it's important for the teachers to be as safe as possible and the families as well. So
I think he's too small for wearing masks for 6 hours.
Sometimes it can be like a little uncomfortable and like pull out your ears, but it's safe for everybody.
I'm glad because even before they changed it, he's in grade 3 and I told him that he has to keep his mask on.
Yeah, they like it, yeah. They like it. They like to use it, yeah.
And it's one experts say is needed.
We're having a stubbornly high rate of community-based transmission of COVID-19, and our vaccine program isn't going as quickly as we would like.
But widening the mask mandate was the only measure brought in today. The province still resisting a vaccine mandate for staff and says cohorts did not prevent transmission but made school operations a challenge. It is promising more data on cases, but teachers and parents have raised concerns around contact tracing.
And we have heard from so many teachers and so many families about the incompleteness of that contact tracing process.
But Dr. Henry says tracers are going as fast as they can, but are stretched, and encouraged parents to share information.
Public health will be posting when there's a risk in the school. And, they're just catching up with that now. And yes, sometimes parents will know, and they'll know the information from other parents prior to public health getting all of the pieces connected together. So I think we have to work together on this.
The mask mandate will be in place until January, when it will be reviewed. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
Okay, for more on why the province is now mandating masks for kindergartners to grade 3s, Justin McElroy joins us. Justin, you've been crunching the numbers, as you do. So is this really needed right now?
Well, it certainly can't hurt, Anita. And when you look at transmission across the province and where cases are surging right now, it is in school-aged children. So let's take a look at this chart. We've shown it before, the percentage of people in all age groups relative to the entire province. And over the course of the pandemic, 6% of all cases have been in people under the age of 10. But in the last week, that's 17%. That's nearly triple. And so the province is looking at these numbers. Primarily, this surge is happening in places the province with lower vaccination rates. And they hope that this is one more tool that can be used to try and see that reduction in cases that we've seen, frankly, in a few other age groups over the past 2 or 3 weeks. But it's been the exact opposite within school children who cannot get vaccinated, that 5 to 12 year age bracket. We'll see if this measure by the province today start seeing any effect in about 2 weeks from now.
All right, and 714 new cases in BC today, along with 11 deaths, 6 of those deaths coming from the interior, 4 in Fraser Health. What can you tell us about the overarching trends you're seeing?
Yeah, and the trend this week has been a little bit worse, frankly, than the last couple of weeks. If you look overall, here's this chart we've shown a few times, was starting to go down, the yellow line, the rolling average. Now it's back up. It rose to about 750 cases on average over the past week. Active cases, again, starting to go up a little bit as well. So a lot of this, as we discussed, is in younger people, but it's still, we're not seeing that reduction in the general community that we would like to see. And because of what's happened over the past 3 or 4 weeks with cases continuing to rise, we're now seeing that show up with the total number of fatalities, 11 today. And if you look at that rise in the red line for the rolling average, we're now averaging more than 7 deaths a day. That's more than we saw during the third wave. And the province is really starting to have to answer questions from people why they can't get transmission down to a point to have deaths at a place where everyone in British Columbia would like them to be.
Okay, thanks, Justin. In response to what it calls a challenging situation, the province says it will be opening dozens of spots for homeless people to isolate in Victoria if they test positive for COVID. Hundreds of cases have been reported in the homeless community there. The city took down encampments, and it's believed people are getting COVID indoors, where they've had nowhere to quarantine. Now, BC Housing and Island Health are aiming to open 50 dedicated spaces where people who want to come inside can isolate or recover to prevent even more spread. The mayor of Victoria is welcoming the move.
So we're in a triage process right now. If somebody is identified on the street today with COVID and no fixed address, there is a place for them to go.
The province expects most of these spaces will be open in several weeks and says the risk of transmission between unsheltered people and the general population in that city is low because of high vaccination rates. And when it comes to people getting their shots, a new poll shows a majority of British Columbians have accessed and used the province's proof of vaccine card. It's required to enter restaurants, gyms, movie theaters, and other places as well. But as the CBC's Michelle Gassoub reports, 3 weeks after it was brought in, there's lingering confusion about where it's needed.
If you've shown your proof of vaccination in the past 3 weeks, you're in the majority. 58% of British Columbians say they've given it a try.
It's not too bad. I haven't had any issues yet with people because I'm just a hostess. But yeah, I think it's great. I think it's going to really bring COVID cases down.
It was easy, just a quick scan and it went on my day.
I think for everyone's safety, it's good to have a vaccine passport.
But according to the same poll from Insights West, 33% have said they weren't asked to show their card in situations where it should have been required.
I haven't been asked for by some local restaurants. I haven't gone to like a big restaurant, but some local restaurants here in the area, they haven't asked for me.
There's been a few places where you can just walk in. I don't know, it seems like inconsistent, like if you have to show it or not, but it hasn't been a hassle when we've had to show it.
10% say they've witnessed bad behavior from people who didn't want to follow the rules. And then there are the questions from people arriving from out of province or abroad.
I don't even know what it is, to be honest.
I did my first shot in Switzerland and I made my second shot here. So yeah, it's a bit of struggle, but it's okay.
Some of the rules are just confusing. For example, proof of vaccination isn't required at cafes and fast food restaurants, but is required for dining in at a restaurant. And while it's not required at pools, it is if there's a fitness center in the same facility as that pool. Today, the province said businesses aren't required to scan your card with the official app. Just a visual check of your card and ID is A-OK. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Criticism is growing over the Prime Minister's decision to fly his family to BC yesterday, but fly over places marking the inaugural National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. As Ashley Burke reports in a tweet yesterday, Justin Trudeau said he spent time talking to residential school survivors on the phone.
On Parliament Hill today, the memorial for victims of residential schools remains. And so do questions about why the Prime Minister skipped out on the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation here.
Actions speak louder than words, and his actions spoke very, very loudly.
A lot of people, I think, look up to him or care about what he has to say, so he should have been here just for that.
Thousands were here to honor lost children and survivors of residential schools. On a day all about symbolism, Trudeau was seen with his wife on a beach in Tofino.
This just shows us survivors that he doesn't actually want to meet with us. He's just, hoping that we will just disappear into the sunset.
Evelyn Korkmaz has suffered abuse and was here with 2 busloads of fellow St. Anne residential school survivors. Trudeau's office said he spent hours on the phone yesterday hearing from 8 residential school survivors.
It's harder to reflect on the truth.
On Wednesday evening, he spoke on Parliament Hill, urging Canadians to honor and embrace the new National Day of Reflection.
It's like celebrating Remembrance Day or reflecting on Remembrance Day on November the 10th rather than November the 11th.
Others point out Trudeau flew to BC without stopping in Kamloops. The discovery of graves there pushed the horror of residential schools back into the spotlight. The chief sent 2 invitations to Trudeau.
I did hold out hope that he would be here today.
But not all Indigenous people are critical.
It's his days off with his family. Give him a break.
The opposition today questioning Trudeau's judgment over the timing of his travel.
I think apology is necessary because Indigenous people have given something, a really difficult part of themselves, to Canadians, to the country. And our top official wasn't there to listen.
No word from Trudeau himself today, who's still in Tofino spending time with his family, but his office said that officials spoke to the chief in Kamloops and are making arrangements for the Prime Minister to visit the community in the near future. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
One of Vancouver's longest-serving mayors who helped establish the first supervised injection site here has died. Philip Owen was 88. For more on his life and his work, we're joined by Dan Burrett. And Dan, Owen seemed like an unlikely ally for drug treatment.
Anita, one colleague calls Philip Owen a manifestation of the Vancouver elite. He was born to a well-known Shaughnessy family. His father, who was a lawyer, was BC's lieutenant governor. But Owen's political career took some very different forms. Park Board Commissioner, City Councillor, then Mayor with the business-leaning Nonpartisan Association from 1993 to 2002, winning 3 elections with ease. But as more people were killed by heroin, crack, and other drugs in this city, he came to champion the 4-pillar strategy: harm reduction, prevention, treatment, and enforcement.
Treatment's important, but we don't have that. Drug court's important, we don't have that. Detox is important, we don't have that. Well, why don't we start putting those things in place? So let's get started.
Council passed that plan in 2001, and it led, as you said, to the founding of North America's first supervised injection site, Insight on Hastings Street It has survived several legal and political challenges. Owen was hailed by colleagues, opponents, and drug users.
I was near death from drugs, and he came down on a Christmas morning and, went for a walk with him. Made me feel like $1 million.
A gracious man, yes. Certainly the stereotype, blue blood, Shaughnessy, and all of that, but had an empathy that made him as comfortable on a back lane in the southeast corner of the city as it did in Shaughnessy and the downtown east side. So that's a remarkable human achievement. That's the man he was.
Owen chose not to seek re-election in 2002 after a fight with his own party. His family says he died last night after living with Parkinson's disease. He leaves behind his wife, 3 children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Mayor Kennedy Stewart says the city wouldn't be moving on safe supply if not for Philip Owen's leadership. And flags at City Hall will fly and remain at half staff until after Owen's funeral. Anita.
Dan Burrett, thank you. A Richmond homeowner is fighting the city over massive amounts of garbage cluttering the yard and driveway. The house near Severn Drive and Williams Road has been the subject of complaints from neighbors for 13 years and has been hit with thousands in fines because of what the city calls unsightly premises. Now, Richmond councillors are debating if city staff can be sent to clean up for a 3rd time at the owner's expense. The owner is resisting, saying they've tried to deal with derelict vehicles, a garbage-filled shipping container, and piles of paper. And another headache, all that trash has attracted rats. Council will make a decision next week. A woman is facing the largest ever fine for doing exactly what BC conservation officers plead with people not to do. She had been feeding bears and luring them to her rural property for months. The Whistler resident was found guilty under the Wildlife Act and hit with a $60,000 ticket following a 3-year-long investigation. Officers found she had been buying food in bulk and feeding it to black bears in the summer of 2018. On the menu, up to 10 cases of apples, 50 pounds of carrots, and up to 15 dozen eggs each week. The Conservation Office says her behavior created an extraordinary risk to the public. Now to a story about schools that doesn't have anything to do with the pandemic. Changes to BC's online learning system could force thousands of students in kindergarten to grade 12 to find new schools next year. As Joel Ballard reports, some parents are frustrated the province is trying to fix a system that, for many, is working just fine.
Lazarus.
Yes, what does that mean?
My name is Lazarus.
Yes, that's right.
During the pandemic, the Banez family switched to online learning and never looked back.
I really saw the growth in both of my children.
Especially her son Lazarus. He's autistic and started to thrive.
He was hitting academic milestones, right? Like all the time, the things that we didn't know that he was able to do, because in the school system, we were dealing with behavior all the time. Ah, what's that? That's a C. How come it's a C? You don't need a C there.
This is where Lazarus and Estella learn, in their living room. Their courses are through an online school in Kamloops, but soon that could change. An overhaul by the Education Ministry means next year, families will have to take their online classes from their own districts.
You know, autism and change does not go well together, right? The transition is so much harder when we finally found our sanctuary of a school.
Across the province, more than 75,000 students attend online schools, and they're able to access a swath of programs regardless of where they live.
Online learning actually is really leveling the playing field for a lot of families. And that's why these ministry changes are so concerning.
As part of the changes, there will also be new provincial online learning schools open to all BC students. But the details are thin, and parents feel out of the loop. The Ministry of Education says the goal is to offer students equal access by giving districts and authorities more flexibility to offer online and blended learning to their students. It does say it will hold public forums for families to discuss their concerns in October.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Estella.
Back in Richmond, the Banez family has found a system that works, and they just hope that the new changes don't disrupt it.
To take that away from us, who have already tried other systems before, is just too much, just way too much for us to have to go through.
Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
It's October, and that means a few things: cooler days, changing leaves, and a proliferation of pumpkins. And now a Richmond farmer is hoping his gigantic gourd will put his name in the history books.
Oh yeah, a lot of pumpkin there.
Tomorrow is BC's Great Pumpkin Commonwealth Weigh-Off at Krauseberry Farms in Langley. Farmer Dave Chan has been entering his gourds of unusual sizes into the competition for decades. He hopes he'll break the BC record of 1,543 pounds. In case you're wondering, that works out to about 600 pumpkin pies. Now, it's not just bragging rights up for grabs. The winner will take home $1 per pound of praiseworthy pumpkin. I think someone is trying to trip me up with all those P words in there.
Yeah, almost as hard to grow as it is to say with the alliterations. I don't know why we weren't invited to be part of the growing team, Anita.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that we are probably the best gardeners at CBC, so we would totally break the record.
Missed opportunity. I mean, I may still be wondering why my baby tomatoes are all green and did not make it, but there's a shot for us next year, Anita. I want to take you to the current temperatures, though, because something that we're watching in the days ahead are those dropping overnight temperatures. We've got the first snow in the forecast, not for us, but for parts of British Columbia that hasn't seen it yet, up towards Prince George as we head into early next week. And you know, it's around the corner. 13 right now at YVR. There's a chill in the air, but it was nice to see sun for most of the day behind yesterday's rainmaker. We are still waiting for official totals, by the way, from yesterday's storm system. The rain gauge at YVR stopped working. Now, nearby Sea Island recording over 33 millimeters. We're probably coming in at about third place for wettest September on record. And right on cue, the next Pacific system hitting Haida Gwaii right now. Wind warnings in place. That's what will bring a few showers to us tomorrow night. But a pretty dry, albeit cloudy Saturday for the South Coast. We may see a few breaks in there. Most of the showers holding off until Saturday overnight into Sunday, and not even all the models picking it up. So just a brief interlude into an otherwise dry weekend. I'll break down Sunday and into early next week, coming up a little later on.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
And while the weather today was dry and bright, we know winter is near. That means it's time to get out those winter tires. Starting today until March 31st, winter tires are mandatory on most BC highways. Here, proper winter tires are marked as mud and snow or with the mountain or snowflake symbol. You need the tires for driving on some South Coast highways, including the Sea to Sky, some Vancouver Island highways, including the Malahat, and all highways in the north and the interior, including the major routes linking the Lower Mainland, Highway 3 and Highway 97C. Commercial vehicles are also required to carry chains on most routes. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. I'm your host, Anita Bathe. If you're not already doing so, please find our program on the CBC GEM app. It's free. You can also catch us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Peter Nygard has fast-tracked his extradition to the United States, but it's complicating the matter. New charges by police here in Canada. The legal saga facing the former fashion mogul is next. The Université de Sainte-Anne in Nova Scotia has unveiled a new bust honoring the province's first Mi'kmaq person to get a teacher's license. Elsie Basque is a residential school survivor and an Order of Canada recipient for her work as an educator and advocate. Her daughter spoke with the CBC about her mother's life.
I see that expression in her, and that was one of her things she would say, "How about that?" You know, I'm going to get emotional. I know through this whole thing. But she, you know, she made an impact. It was a very different life than what they had here. They lived in the woods. They had no running water. They didn't even have a well. They went to the spring. They lived completely off the land. He built them a house, but they would camp in the summer and in the spring and net for salmon. And it was a different lifestyle altogether. And he wanted something more for her, and that's why he always told her to get an education, work with your head and not with your hands. She often had night terrors from the things that happened to her. When she testified before the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, she said, I'm not going to talk about the Indian residential school. I'm going to talk about my time at the Sacred Heart Academy. She said, because you've heard all of the abusive behavior that happened there, and she says it's all true, and there's nothing I can add to that. But what I can add is that when I went to Sacred Heart Academy, I got the education I was promised. And she was so proud of all of her students because all of them had accomplishments. There was 2 men became chief, one was a nurse, one went in the Air Force and was an air traffic controller. You know, they had accomplishments that they wouldn't have had they gone to Indian residential school. She testified before the Truth and Reconciliation hearings. We listened to quite a few of them from other communities. She read the recommendations. Her view was she was like, well, if it happens, that would be, she didn't know if it would ever, she knew it wouldn't happen in her lifetime. And probably the lifetimes of many of the students there. It's a hurt that happened through generations, and I think it's going to, in her thoughts were it's going to take generations to resolve that. And I think she's right.
Canadian fashion mogul Peter Nygard has agreed to fast-track possible extradition to the U.S., where he's facing charges that include human trafficking. Nygard and his lawyers have opted to skip a court hearing and go straight to Canada's Justice Minister, who will decide what happens next. As the CBC's Carolyn Bargoop reports, she attended the court proceeding in Winnipeg and has the details.
Morning.
Peter Nygard didn't come to court in person. Instead, he appeared by video from Headingley Correctional Centre, a provincial jail just outside Winnipeg, where he's been held in custody for the past 9 months. CBC and other media outlets won the right to have cameras in the courtroom for the hearing. The United States wants him extradited to New York to stand trial for a number of alleged offences, including sex trafficking. Court heard Nygard agreed to speed up the extradition process and signed the papers last night. Manitoba Court of Queen's Bench Chief Justice Glenn Joyal asked him if he understood what that meant.
You will not be surrendered until the expiry of 30 days, and that you have the right to appeal the order that's now been granted, and you also have the contemporaneous right to apply for judicial interim release or bail. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
Instead of drawing out the court process, Nygard has consented to committal, meaning his case goes straight to Canada's Minister of Justice, who will decide if the 80-year-old should be sent to the U.S.
This has taken a tremendous toll on him, so we can only assume that he's not going to get any better, at least in the short term.
Nygard's lawyers say agreeing to fast-track the process does not mean he's admitting to any wrongdoing.
Mr. Nygard denies any allegations of criminal conduct. He denies any suggestion that he engaged in conduct for which he should be charged criminally.
In this case, it's a form
This extradition expert says it could take months before the minister decides whether or not to send Nygard to the U.S. And then the Manitoba Court of Appeal has to review that decision to make sure there were no errors.
So Nygard is going to be here for a long time yet. He's not simply throwing in his cards.
Gary Botting says it could still take 6 months before the final decision is made. And Nygard's lawyers have the right to ask the minister to allow him to remain in Canada on compassionate grounds. To complicate matters further, the Toronto Police Service has just issued an arrest warrant for Nygard on charges of sexual assault and forcible confinement related to 6 accusers. They say the investigation is not over yet and they will look at information if it comes to them. So now the Minister of Justice not only has to determine whether Nygard should be extradited to the U.S., the minister will also have to decide if he should stand trial in Canada first. In the meantime, Nygard can once again apply for bail. Caroline Bargood, CBC News, Winnipeg.
U.S. drug maker Merck says it has developed a pill to effectively treat COVID-19. An early study seems promising. Merck says its experimental antiviral drug cut the risk of hospitalization and death by half. If the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approves this new pill, it would become the first oral treatment for COVID-19. One Canadian expert is encouraged.
But certainly the fact that it showed a 50% mortality in those who had mild to moderate disease, but at high risk of progressing, and it showed a benefit of reducing mortality up to 50%. I mean, that would be huge if that is borne out in subsequent and larger trials.
A couple of cautions around today's news. The results were released by the company and have not been peer-reviewed, nor has the raw data behind the results been released. As for this country, Merck says it has initiated a rolling submission to Health Canada that allows health officials to review safety and efficacy data on the medication, while later-stage clinical trials are still underway. In Alberta's ICUs, 90% of patients are either unvaccinated or partially vaccinated. And as the CBC's Erin Collins explains, the crisis in their intensive care units is now having an impact beyond the province's borders.
Snapshots of better times, ones where Sharon Durham's smile was the focus of photographs, a stark contrast to the picture today. Durham's cancer now impossible to miss and spreading fast.
If I don't get the surgery, it's going to be going into my brain and my eye.
That surgery, scheduled for this week, canceled as Durham drove out from Saskatchewan because of Alberta's overwhelmed healthcare system. The 54-year-old left in limbo.
I don't know. It's such an invasive cancer. Like, I hope this next surgery gets it all. It's just because it's insidious. It creeps around, right?
Across Alberta, similar scenes are playing out. The province's ICUs jammed with COVID patients, forcing the cancellation of surgeries, a result of the province opening too quickly this summer, according to some experts.
We can see that given the high case count that's happening in Alberta, that it really didn't work, that it was a mistake.
For his part, Alberta's premier says he's focused on the future, not the past.
I'm not interested in the blame game. I'm just interested in us getting through this, supporting our healthcare workers, increasing the vaccine rates, reducing transmission while we increase capacity. That's our focus.
Many Alberta doctors are calling for a strict lockdown to free up ICU spaces, but the province says that isn't in their plans. So for now, at least, the situation in Alberta's ICUs will likely persist, frustrating patients inside and outside the province.
It's awful because I'm not an angry person, and I've become so angry with the unvaccinated, with our government.
Some help is on the way for Alberta's ICUs. Personnel from the Canadian Armed Forces and the Red Cross could arrive at any time. It's good news, but no comfort for the growing line of people waiting to access the province's healthcare system. Erin Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
With flu season coming, mixed with an escalation of COVID-19 among kids, we tell you what to watch for and speak with a pediatrician next.
Some 200 municipalities in British Columbia depend on the Mounties for police protection they pay for. But under a deal reached today by the BC and federal governments, they may not be able to afford it much longer. It's a 10-year deal, and by the end of it, larger municipalities will have to pay 90% of their RCMP costs. Some of the towns are already refusing to go along with the agreement. Jerry Thompson reports.
Williams Lake is cattle country.
a small city of about 15,000 on a high plateau in the BC interior. This year, the city will pay about 50% of the cost of the RCMP. By the end of the new 10-year agreement, local taxpayers will have to come up with 90%, and Mayor Tom Mason says that's too much.
And in this particular case here, the police are actually enforcing provincial laws like traffic and drug or alcohol related. And as far as the municipality is concerned, the cost is just too great, and the province is just shifting the load from the rightful people, which is the province, onto the local taxpayers, and we're not going to pay it.
So far, Williams Lake has refused to pay $300,000, its share of the RCMP costs. And City Council has set aside $30,000 as a legal defense fund, almost daring the province to take them to court. But there are other cities that would dearly love to pay only 90% of their police costs. Vancouver, for example, is a city that pays 100% of the cost of its own 1,400-member police department. That's $50 million a year. And what's good for Williams Lake is good for Vancouver, according to Mayor Harcourt.
The issue, though, is that 43 municipalities in this province, over 15,000 in population, receive anywhere from 40 to 20% cost sharing with the province towards the cost of their RCMP force. There are 12 of us who have our own police force who receive zero. So we're overtaxed in Vancouver this year, $9 million.
Mayor Harcourt insists that if Vancouver does not get the same kind of subsidy that Williams Lake does, the city police here may just refuse to enforce federal drug laws. Jerry Thompson, CBC News, Vancouver.
The cry of timber and the crash of falling trees. This is high in the hill country, the land of the small logger, where the big companies don't usually go, and where the small man sometimes cuts with old-fashioned horsepower. A truck grinding its way along a trail loaded with logs, some destined for the mills of the integrated giants. This makes the small logger the backbone of the country's biggest moneymaker. But where will the logs go? They need a market, and right now it isn't there, even though labor and machinery costs are flying high. Some companies are bankrupt and don't even know it yet. The loggers want help from the government, reduce stumpage and royalty charges, and the quotas for cutting. If they don't get help, they say many camps will close, like this one, but not only for the winter, for good.
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Starting today, BC drivers must have snow tires to travel on most of the province's highways. The annual requirement covers all highways in the north and interior, sections of some highways on the south coast, including the Sea to Sky, and sections of Vancouver Island, including the Malahat. A Richmond property littered with cars, pallets, cardboard, and large shipping container has been the subject of growing discontent from neighbors in City Hall, and it's lasted more than a decade. The owner, an elderly woman, is appealing a city order to comply with an unsightly premises regulation bylaw issued 2 years ago. Her son says he is trying to clean up the property, but neighbors say it's affecting their quality of life. BC has expanded its mask mandate in schools to include students kindergarten to grade 3. This starts on Monday and comes after Vancouver, Surrey, and Burnaby brought in their own mask rules. We also know this fourth wave is shifting more to young, unvaccinated people. Along with COVID, we are also entering flu season. So how do you decipher between the two, and will the new mask mandates protect us all from both? Dr. Catherine Smart is a pediatrician and president of the Canadian Medical Association. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Dr. Smart, what are we expecting the flu season to be like this year after virtually nothing last year?
I think that's a real concern, certainly for all of us right now, is that exact question. You know, do some of these public health mitigation strategies that we still have in place for COVID and coming back to things like indoor masking, are they going to protect us again from another flu season, which is what we saw last year? Or now that things are more open, might we see flu resurface and complicate things, as of course clinically it looks very much like COVID. So I think it's hard to know for sure, but it's certainly on our minds in terms of what the flu might bring this winter.
Well, it seems like last year nobody even got a cold, and now I look all around me and everybody has a cold. So what do we know about the difference between flu symptoms and COVID? How do we tell?
Well, I think they can look very similar. They're both respiratory illnesses, so you're going to see a lot of similar things like runny nose, cough, fever, sometimes gastrointestinal symptoms like vomiting and diarrhea. So they can look really very much the same. I think the only way you're going to know for sure is for people getting tested. And I think right now, because COVID is still a big issue, people are being tested frequently when they have any sort of respiratory illnesses. So that will help us, first of all, know when flu is starting to show up, if it does, and also help us distinguish between which cases are flu and which cases are COVID.
And what are the concerns or things that we need to keep in mind around getting the COVID shot and the flu vaccine near each other?
Well, the good news is NACI has come out this week saying that now COVID can be administered at the same time as other vaccines, which is excellent news going into flu season, as it means people that are now considering their COVID shots that haven't had them yet. And of course, for children, where we may hopefully be seeing COVID vaccines available in the next few months, we're not going to have that same challenge of having to time or spread out the vaccinations from each other.
I want to talk about that a little bit more. You say that we could be seeing kids under 12 getting the shot in the next few months. Where exactly are we at with that? Is Health Canada reviewing it right now? What can we expect?
So Pfizer has released their initial data set to Health Canada, and we're expecting the full data set to come out to Health Canada anytime. And then once that happens, it'll be reviewed by Health Canada and hopefully approved. And then from there, we'll move to the rollout. So I think we are at this point, hopefully weeks away from that decision being made.
Dr. Catherine Smart is a pediatrician and president of the Canadian Medical Association. Thank you.
Thank you.
As the planet warms, animals are physically adapting. The amazing ways their bodies are changing. Next. And at 6:40, a live look just south of downtown Vancouver, down Cambie Street. A mix of weather ahead of the weekend. Johanna will let you know when you might want to have that umbrella handy. Next.
We're Young Drivers of Canada Scarborough Club, and we're conducting a seatbelt survey as to whether they're wearing their seatbelts or not.
What are you finding?
Most of the people aren't wearing their seatbelts, but they say they're in favor of it.
The year was 1973, and the concept of potentially having to wear a seatbelt in Ontario was so new that those who were buckled up during this survey were offered a prize.
Excuse me, sir, are you wearing your seatbelt?
Yeah.
Yes, you are? Great.
$1.
Oh, good for you. Thank you.
More than 40 years later, as the COVID-19 vaccine rolls out, how's this for an incentive?
Alberta today is announcing that we are launching the Open for Summer Vaccine Lottery with 3 $1 million prizes.
Throughout the pandemic, we've heard comparisons between what's happening now and public health policies like seatbelt laws or banning smoking indoors. And we wanted to ask a few experts what they think about that.
I'm Kerry Bowman, and I teach bioethics and global health at the University of Toronto. Smoking comes to mind. I was around for that when it was introduced, and a lot of the pushback.
I can understand people not wanting to smoke, but if we choose to smoke, it's okay. You know what I mean? We have our choice, right?
Freedom, freedom, freedom.
It's a similar narrative we're hearing at protests these days.
My message is about freedom.
Were you surprised to see the amount of pushback?
No, I wasn't surprised to see the pushback. Not at all. I'm absolutely as supportive of vaccination as a person could possibly be. But I think the entire discourse before vaccine mandates and passports was really dominated by a purely medical view and by almost entirely by the medical community. And there wasn't a lot of thought, could this radicalize some people? Is it fair? Is it just? What does it mean in terms of a larger social cultural context? And what I worry about as well is there's no plan for the end game. And I find that very worrisome from a civil rights point of view.
These two doctors work in the community with people who are vaccine hesitant. They say a big difference between then and now is social media.
So I think going back to those basics right now is really important, to be able to have some one-on-one conversations with people, to be able to direct them to reliable information so they're not consuming all the misinformation.
We've had our lives change through this pandemic, and now we have this vaccine passport.
Some people may not understand, some people may be a bit more hesitant right now, but I think the important thing is that, like we've always done in the past with seatbelts, with smoking indoors, talk about why it's important, why we're doing it, why this policy is in place, and then continue to educate people and move forward.
Something they all agree on is this.
I think it's not a good thing in terms of human nature when we set up these us and them kind of dynamics.
You have to understand that not everybody is the same, and some people do take more time.
We need to approach people with compassion, with empathy, and take the time to educate them.
Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
Longer beaks, larger ears, bigger limbs. These are a few of the shape-shifting features scientists have noticed in some warm-blooded animals as they try to survive in a warming world. Johanna Wagstaffe has more on the creatures adapting to a changing planet.
For decades now, animals have been trying to deal with global warming. Some migrate to cooler areas, some have changed the timing of breeding, and others, it turns out, have been evolving to change their body size to cool down more quickly. A new paper from Deakin University in Australia reviewed the published literature around the world when it comes to this topic and found that for some animals, warmer climates tend to produce creatures with longer limbs and larger appendages. So for warm-blooded animals, global warming has made it difficult for their bodies to maintain a constant internal body temperature. I mean, we know as humans that extreme heat can overstress our bodies. Many animals use their appendages to regulate their internal temperature. Think African elephants who flap their large ears to disperse heat. The beaks of birds perform a similar function. Blood flow can be diverted to the bill when the bird is hot. So by changing the size of their ears, tails, beaks, and other limbs in parallel with temperature increase, some species have begun shape-shifting in an attempt to keep up. Okay, well, not exactly shape-shifting. This is natural selection happening in real time. And it's a pattern that the study has found is already happening in species today. Studies show the beak size of gang cockatoos and red-rumped parrots has increased by between 4% and 10% since 1871. Mammal appendages also are increasing in size. For example, the masked shrew tail and leg length have increased significantly since 1950, and in the great round-leaf bat, wing size has increased by 1.64%. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. More studies are needed to determine which kinds of animals are most affected all around the world. And this could enable us to identify which species are most vulnerable with climate change and require conservation priority. At the end of the day, though, while the research shows some animals are adapting to climate change, many will simply not be able to evolve in time. The only way to truly protect future species is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and prevent as much global warming as possible. And now, you're Science Smart. If you have a science question on your mind, send me a tweet. I'll try to get it answered.
Okay, Joe, I know this is quite a serious thing, but I am curious, does this mean that we as humans will start adapting? And if so, what features would change?
That's a big topic amongst climate scientists and anthropologists. Haven't seen any studies as of late, but I'll keep you posted if anything comes up, so to speak. But speaking of dramatic changes, I want to take you to another story that we've been watching all week. This is live footage once again of the La Palma volcano erupting on the Spanish Canary Islands. Activity has significantly ramped up in the past 24 hours. Several new fissures have opened, allowing more lava to roll down the side of the volcano into the ocean. You can again hear that live sound as it erupts as we speak. We've seen double the amount of lava since the last eruption in 1971. Over 1,000 buildings have been destroyed, but the 6,000 people that have been evacuated so far have gotten out with enough time. And I know we were watching that sulfuric acid a cloud after the lava met the ocean yesterday. So far that is staying contained, but lots of monitoring happening. But just a powerful natural disaster unfolding as we speak. We'll check in again early next week. Taking you to something else we're checking in on, our dropping temperatures as we get into the fall season. Quick look at our temperature trend here in Metro Vancouver. Definitely some cooler afternoon highs in the forecast. Seasonal for this time of the year for afternoon highs around 16. So we're actually below for the next week or so. Tracking that rain that's moving in Saturday overnight into Sunday. Again, Saturday looking mainly cloudy, but mainly dry. And most of Sunday looking dry as well. It looks like our showers will happen for the most part overnight, but generally 5 to 10 millimeters to kick off October after a very wet September. The bulk of this system hitting Haida Gwaii tonight. Wind warnings are in place. The front tracked down through the island tomorrow. So a pretty wet weekend. Anyone out storm watching in Tofino? Lots of waves and good stormy weather. Things will clear out across the island for Sunday, and we too will see possibly some late day clearing across the south coast. Most of this system does not make it through to the interior. Quick look at those temperatures, though, for the interior into early next week. They're coming down as well. See that cooler air descending early next week in through places like Williams Lake, Quesnel, Williams Lake, Prince George. Tuesday morning could be the first time we see a few wet snowflakes mixing in there. We got a few days to go until the first snowfall for central and northern BC. 11 tomorrow in through Prince George and Prince Rupert. Prince Rupert showers and dying winds will be your story for the weekend. Much deserved. Cranbrook not getting touched by this system at all. The Kootenay's looking lovely through the weekend. So we've got that 15 for Saturday and Sunday, lingering showers through Sunday morning. Looks like a cloudy start to early next week. Some showers move in for Tuesday, linger through Wednesday. That's when we'll notice our cooler temperatures, Anita. It's definitely saying goodbye to the double digits overnight kind of weather.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Well, have you found a few online deals over the past year and a half? They're out there, but behind discounts at some of the world's biggest fast fashion retailers, some troubling news. CBC's Marketplace took a closer look at some products, and as Charles the Agro shows us, some contain potentially harmful chemicals.
So like they have sweatpants and like cargo pants.
This is how 14-year-old Camila Diaz and her friends find their clothes. Ultra fast fashion. There's plenty to choose from, and by most accounts, it's cheap.
How is a raincoat $9.89?
But what's the real cost of these cheap clothes? To find out, Marketplace did some online shopping too, from 6 super popular retailers that don't have brick and mortar stores in Canada.
Country of manufacture was China.
We ask a team led by the University of Toronto to put 38 articles of clothing and other items under the microscope, testing for chemicals and heavy metals that may be toxic in some quantities. 20% of the items had elevated levels of those elements. Environmental chemist Miriam Diamond flagged the elevated levels of phthalates on this bag from Zaful, a chemical used to make plastic pliable and a known endocrine disruptor.
Endocrine disruptors are a wide range of chemicals that have the ability to alter our hormone levels. The phthalates in particular are known to disrupt male reproductive system function.
But that's not all our tests uncovered. The levels of lead in this kid's coat from Shein were found to be nearly 20 times higher than Health Canada's allowable limit in children's products.
I think this trench coat is hazardous waste.
Of the 6 retailers we tested, only Shein, Zaful, and AliExpress's items were flagged as toxic or concerning. All say they've pulled these products from their Canadian sites while they continue to investigate. And Zaful says they've refunded customers who bought that clear tote bag.
You can wash something like...
Experts suggest washing your clothes before you wear.
It'll reduce your own exposure. But over the long term, that's not a good enough solution.
Still, the safest bet when it comes to chemicals on clothing is to buy less ultra-fast fashion.
I saw this really cute cardigan.
Something Camilla says she'll try to do from now on. Charles the Agro, CBC News, Toronto.
Tune in tonight for the full results of the Marketplace investigation into ultra-fast fashion retailers. Find out what you can do to keep you and your family safe when shopping online. Watch the season premiere tonight at 8 p.m. on CBC TV and GEM. A heartwarming gesture of support today at St. Paul's Hospital. Letters delivered to frontline healthcare workers. Their response is next.
In the sacred room at Beechwood Cemetery, volunteers from Indigenous youth group Assembly of Seven Generations are sorting through tiny, colorful tiles. It's no small task. There are more than 50,000 tiles, each a tad larger than a Scrabble piece. Hand-painted and decorated mostly by school children from across the country to honor victims of the residential school system. There are messages of love, hope, and sorrow, or a simple heart.
It makes me feel really good that these children obviously here have a great sense of the horror that unfolded. And also, it's also beautiful to send those wishes for peace as well out into the world. We need a space for both.
I remember the student that did this. Sylvia Smith, a former Ottawa teacher, came up with the idea for Project of Heart in 2005. She was teaching Canadian history to school kids and found that there was scarce mention of the residential school system in official textbooks. Her students wanted to right that wrong. They chose to create the tiles as a way to express their feelings about the harm done to Indigenous children.
Children are the best teachers, and children don't have any artifice. Children speak the truth. When something is unjust, they know it because they're children.
Project of Heart was developed into a learning module for teachers across Canada, leading to the creation of thousands of tiles. They were first assembled in Winnipeg at the closing of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee hearings.
It'll probably be pretty intense.
The co-founder of the Assembly of Seven Generations says she is pleased there is a day for national reflection, but she wants visitors to remember the impact of the residential school system hasn't ended.
A day just isn't good enough when we're still seeing inequalities that Indigenous youth are still facing. So much intergenerational trauma that has been caused because of residential schools, such as suicide, depression, addictions, things like that.
Today, the thousands of tiles will be arranged in a giant maze for visitors to wander through and stop and contemplate. Sandra Abma, CBC News, Ottawa.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. Join CBC Vancouver's Gloria Makarenko at the annual Splash Art Auction and Gala. Get your tickets and help support Arts Umbrella programming. Learn more at artsumbrella.com. And on October 13th, Angela Starrett will moderate a panel of experts at What is the Cost of Care? A free UBC Dialogues discussion about the complex reality of caregiving. Learn more at alumni.ubc.ca.
They were on hand at Vancouver St. Paul's Hospital to hand over letters written to healthcare workers. Letters of appreciation, letters meant to keep spirits high. The receivers, well, they were pretty grateful. Take a look.
Thank you, healthcare hero, from Elizabeth. Oh, and she's 6 years old. Oh, that's very sweet. Very nice.
Thank you guys so much for what you do. These are cards from many different workplaces and elementary schools.
So nice. It's like a much needed boost of energy in a really hard time to work in healthcare.
So I proactively reached out to schools. I reached out to principals and said, this is the project I'm looking to do. I'm looking to rejoice the the healthcare workers and just rebuild that energy. Originally, I thought, maybe I'll get 100 cards if I'm lucky again. I never anticipated 700. It just shows you the appreciation of everyone in the community for what the healthcare workers are doing for us.
Well, I think considering, we were all very disheartened when we saw it,
a lot of movements outside of hospitals, protesting and preventing people from accessing healthcare. So I think things like this just make us feel appreciated.
The fact that it came from the kids, it just means a lot because they're innocent, right? They don't know a whole lot about what's happening. So that for them to grasp this and be able to make these cards for the nurses, I think it feels amazing.
The kids put so much work into making the cards just absolutely beautiful. There's nothing like, I think, getting a letter or a picture from a child to brighten your day. And, this whole community really poured out and wanted to be known that the majority is in support of how hard our healthcare workers have worked this entire pandemic, and long before as well. We might be wearing the capes, but we are not the real superheroes in this situation.
I think many would say, though, they are our healthcare heroes. Well, the weekend is here, and so we will see you back at 6 on Monday evening. But Dan Burritt has more local news tonight at 11. We'll leave you with shots of the volcano in La Palma tonight. Mother Nature putting on a terrifying show.